pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. Good evening. I'd like to welcome everybody to the December 4th Village of Woodbury Planning Board meeting. Has the board had a minute to read the minutes as sent?
Yes.
Any questions? I'll make a motion to accept the minutes as posted.
Second it.
All in favor? Aye. First item on the regular agenda tonight, CAD Signs Corp. Aldi, review revised proposal sign panel for ARB approval displaying Aldi and Kohl's back-to-back on the Woodbury Center monument sign. Said property is located at Center Drive and Route 32, is known as the Village of Woodbury Tax Map, Section 225, Block 2, Lot 1.2. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Jonathan Ekman, representative for Aldi, here to present option 2 to you all, specifically with the Aldi full panel facing southwest on the southwest side of the pylon. The northeast side of the pylon will remain as it is shown here with the Kohl's panel on the other side. I think there was a couple of comments and questions made in the report that I read. Just to clarify that the size of the sign, we aren't proposing anything different than what is existing. I've been told that we had a survey crew go out. I'm not going to say that their numbers are 100% correct, and I'm not going to say that it's not 12 by 47 here today, but what I will say is that we are proposing to simply change the face of the existing Kohl's sign to the Aldi sign as you see it up here.
Natalie?
Good evening, everybody. Okay. So as the applicant just described, they are now before you with an alternate option. Their previous design had split the panel 1/3 Aldi's and the remaining 2/3 to remain as Kohl's. This revision now proposes to have Kohl's on one side and Aldi's on the other, which we think is more in par with your prior approvals. It doesn't necessarily create an increased distraction or create a busy or too wordy sign, which was some of your prior concerns with the application that you previously denied. We do have some comments, particularly with relation to your prior resolution, which restricted the number of tenants per the sign to 8 with the battery, okay. In this case, it would be 9 tenants to be advertised with no more than 8 panels on either side of the pylon and a maximum of 1 tenant per panel. And we think that that language could be revised if you agree that this. With respect to the panel size, we did note that the prior application for Kohl's was 12 feet by 4. This proposed panel now is 13 feet, 10.5 inches, and 47.5 inches tall. So that's almost an increase of 2 feet in length and 1/2 inch in height. Whether the Kohl's sign was actually larger originally, which is what it sounds like the applicant's surveyor has found, that's not consistent with your prior approval, and we need to discuss that further. We also recommend that you confirm there are no revisions to the current sign operation as far as lighting and hours of operation. We know of none, but the impact should be considered. The applicant is also requesting that the planning board approve their switching the Aldi's and Kohl's panels at their discretion. We think you can consider that and impose any reasonable restrictions that are appropriate. As with the prior approval for Aldi's at Woodbury Center, the number of colors on the sign should be addressed. The code allows up to 3 uniform colors on a multi-tenant directory sign, where the Aldi's panel proposes 5+. The applicant did secure a variance for the number of colors on the wall signs, but not for the pylon, so we believe that they need to be referred to the ZBA again for this. With respect to seeker, the council has previously advised this would be considered a type 2, but we recommend you confirm this is appropriate, considering variance for the number of colors. And that's all we have.
Thank you. Rick?
That was very comprehensive, and so I have very little to add. I agree certainly that it does need to get referred to the ZBA with respect to the colors, because the colors were not for this sign, and they have more than the 5 that are noted. And that you have to consider this issue of flipping this sign. I'm not sure how that practically works, or whether or not that's of any concern to you whatsoever, whether or not you have somebody going up there every so often and changing the sign. If that's an issue for you, then you ought to explore with the applicant as to exactly the sort of the contours of that, how that would work, if that matters to you at all. But other than that, I have nothing further to add.
Ward?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Yep.
To the applicant, what do you mean exactly by flipping the sign? Do you mean electronically or physically flipping it? And you also said at the discretion of Aldi's.
Yes, so it would be physically flipping, taking the Aldi panel off and the Kohl's panel on the other side, and actually just rotating them on each side. The intent is that roadside signage allows you to gain visibility to potential customers driving up and down the road. We did some studies in the direction in which potential customers that live in the area would enter and come towards the site from. We feel as though the majority of those would be traveling towards the building and the pylon from the southwest. However, if we feel as though that's been up in that position for a period of time, we would like to try and capture potential customers coming from the other direction, and we would send out our sign crew to go ahead and flip those 2 panels.
So do we have a set pattern when it's going to be flipped? I mean, is it going to be weekly or daily?
No, because I'm
monthly?
going to pay these guys every time that I want it done. I would venture to say that it might only be flipped once or twice in its life. It's just during this initial couple of years to get the market recognition, we want to try and have the opportunity to have as much visibility to the customers as possible, which is why in my lease with Kohl's, I had negotiated the opportunity to be able to flip to either side of the pylon.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Can I ask just a clarifying issue? When you say flip, and it can easily be flipped, are you talking about that they physically go up and remove one sign and then replace it on the other, or that it's on some sort of mechanical thing where it can just flip one way or the other?
The first. They'll take a crane up in a bucket. This is a plastic panel that fits into the frame, which the Aldi one will be the same size as the Kohl's, and they will literally just take both of them out and rotate them around to the other side.
So the only time you would go up to fix the sign would be to adjust it or repair it. It seems unnatural to constantly have the ability to flip it from one side to the other.
I would say unnatural, yes. I also think that it's a bit unconventional to have a split pylon in this sense. This is a real estate deal that happened out of us taking a part of an existing Kohl's building. And with that came elements of signage that was a bit more complicated than I think in most scenarios. And that's why this is being, I think,
Seems like
put
a lot
forward.
of extra work and time and potential risk, but that's one issue. So I'm not in favor of the sign flipping. The other piece is the dimension of the previous sign was approved, and this sign is going to be larger than that. That's another
If
item.
we could discuss, I think maybe before we get into the size of the sign, time and effort is, I think that's on me, my company, and in my position to pay for that.
Yeah, but it's a distraction. You know, they got the truck up there, you're doing something, and then people are driving by.
Can you speak into the mic? It's tough to hear you.
It's a distraction from drivers if you're up there in the bucket truck. While the bucket truck is there, it's blocking the other signs, so no one else, the potential drivers that are going by, don't have the opportunity to see the sign. there's a couple issues with the desire to change it that I see.
Agree if I was doing it very often. I think if what we could potentially do is maybe set a limit on how many times it could be done. I'm not looking to do this weekly or monthly. Probably twice a year at max. It's costly for me to do that and time consuming, and it's not something that I would look to endeavor to do very often, but it's something that I want to have the opportunity to do if it means that I can increase my sales potential and customer reach.
Okay.
And did you say that this is in your lease with Kohl's, that Kohl's is agreeable to this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
I have no real
You want
question.
to do the dimensions?
Well, I would think part of the, at least this board would probably want to make sure that the resolution is that it's the same size as the Coles panel, so that everything is at least consistent on that pylon. Is that something you would be
Yep.
able to?
Yep, that is correct.
You want to get verified that it's the same size?
Well, that
It's
would
going to
be,
get bigger next time they put it up. It's going to keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Every time they flip it, is it going to get bigger?
No, it won't. I'm only paying for my panel. I'm not going to pay for a new Kohl's panel, so
well, I was thinking, you think the tracks would have to line up because they slide in and out, so they'd have to do a lot of work, so.
Dimensions can always be stated as a condition.
yeah,
I think it'd be a condition of the resolution.
it's got to fit in between these two brick pillars. There's a lot of limits to what I can do there, so we will stay within the frame that is existing, and it will not be any larger than the existing panel.
Natalie has raised an issue about whether or not, on this difference in size, whether the Kohl sign as constructed was actually larger than that was approved. And so what we will do in the condition of the resolution is that the size of this sign is going to be restricted to the size of the sign as approved by the planning board, not necessarily as fixed up there if it's larger than what it was approved.
You got a tape measure? We climbing up there now and measuring, or?
Can you just clarify that point? Is it that we're going to maintain that the Aldi panel will be no larger than the panel that is existing
No,
as Kohl's?
Aldi panel is going to be the same size as the Kohl's panel, but before that gets put up, the Kohl's panel, it has to be confirmed that that's of the right size. Because if they put up a slightly larger sign than they were approved for, they don't have the right to do that. So they either have to come back and ask for that larger sign, or that it has to go back to the original approval.
Okay. In the interim, and I'm looking to get a sign up as quickly as possible and minimize as much as I have been coming here for the last year, minimize the amount of future trips out here. That issue would not be an Aldi issue. That would have to be a Kohl's issue, and I could bring that up to them and direct them to this process. But in the interim, can I still put up my Aldi panel on that sign while they are, if they have to, come back through?
Well, first of all, you're going to need a variance, so you have to go to the ZBA to get a
Correct.
variance. So
Yep.
that's going to take you a couple of months anyway. Between the schedule, I assume, between the scheduling and the public hearing that has to occur. So it's not going to be something that's going to be put up in a couple of weeks.
Fair.
So nobody has a right to put up something or to replace something that was inconsistent with the original approval, right? So if you want it, so somebody's going to have to go up there and confirm, which I imagine is Gary, or Gary's office, and we'll have to have the use of your bucket truck or something to go ahead and determine that, or have an engineer. I imagine that would be acceptable, to have an engineer go ahead and certify, your engineer certify as to the dimensions of what's up there, because an engineer is bound by their license to go ahead and represent things truthfully. So you've do that in the past on many other issues where you rely upon a stamped engineer's statement, or if it's on the plans of what the actual size of the sign is. And the condition will be that it can't be any larger than, and we'll look back in the records and find out what size that was supposed to be, and that's the size that it has to be. And if the one that's up there is too big, it has to go back to conforming and can't just stay that way. Now, whether that's an issue for you or for Kohl's is really between you and Kohl's, all right?
Yep.
Kohl's has authorized you through an owner authorization to come in and ask for this, right? And we're telling you that you and Kohl's, that it's going to have to be the same size as what was approved. And if it's determined that it's larger than that now, then Kohl's can't keep up their sign either, because there'd be a violation. So who comes back and asks for a larger sign, if that's the way you want to do it, that's going to be up to you and Kohl's to come back and get a larger sign. But until you ask for a larger sign, it's going to be restricted to whatever sign was approved. Now, maybe it was approved at the size that it's up there. We don't know.
Right.
But it's going to be restricted, unless there's another approval by this board, it's going to be restricted to what it was previously approved. And also, they're not going to be able to vote on a resolution of approval until you get the variance, because they're not allowed to go ahead and do that. So after you get a variance, it'll have to be put back on the planning board here to give you the final approval of the sign with the colors as you've asked for.
Everybody got what Rick said?
Yes.
Is everybody okay if the board was to approve it, okay with that condition?
How do we feel about the flipping?
I would like to see it spelled out in a condition of the resolution as far as the amount of times a year it can be done. Otherwise, I mean, I think it would add confusion for people that truly don't know where Kohl's or Aldi's is, to see it one time and then not another time they might think, oh, did they go out of business? I think it can add confusion. So,
I think I heard it would only be for a period of a couple of years too, not, maybe
Right.
a timeline for like 3 years, once a year at max, that kind of thing. I heard
on?
Is this thing on?
It's on.
Okay.
Just have to get
Comedian
closer.
that said that a lot.
You just don't have very.
I
projected.
suggested, or I thought I heard, that it was for a period of time that the sign would want to be flipped for. So if we were to allow it to be flipped at all, maybe put a number of years that it's permitted to be flipped. So 3 years, once a year, that kind of thing. But at the end of the 3 years, it can't be flipped anymore. Does that make sense?
It's whatever the board wants. I mean, you have to have a rational basis for which to put on such a condition. The applicant is saying that it will be changed, as I understood the last statement, no more than once, twice a year. So if you want to put, it can be changed no more frequently than every 6 months, up to a certain period of time. If you think that up to a certain period of time has a rational basis as to your concerns as a planning board and your general powers of having things for health and safety reasons.
What's the possibility of that store taking over another sign's position if that's another store leaves or loses its lease? I mean, is that something we can consider as a condition?
to be a permanent.
I'm not sure.
That it would have a permanent slot if another tenant leaves?
So
No,
like
if-
Aldi
if
goes
the-
out
if-
and Stop and Shop comes in. Is Stop and Shop going to be allowed to do the same thing because Aldi's allowed to do it right now?
They would have to come before this board, all right, because it's an amendment of a sign that's associated with a site plan. So they would have to come before the board, and at that time, you would determine what they're asking for. It may be that they're asking for a larger sign, but they're going to get rid of 2 signs. So I think that there's no reason to put something in this resolution with respect to the sign.
Okay.
Well, that's a hypothetical. We're going to try
Yeah.
to avoid hypotheticals.
So if I misunderstood his question, I thought you were saying put a condition in this resolution with respect to what may happen if somebody else comes in that spot for a new tenant that now wants to put something on a sign.
Well, I was thinking, I was reading, there's one of the stores that may be bankrupt or did file for bankruptcy, may not be in existence if they decide to
One
close.
of the.
Right.
So there may be a vacancy.
I understand. If Forever 21 goes out, can there be a condition that the Aldi take that panel instead of this?
That's what I was thinking.
And unfortunately, that's very, very, very difficult negotiated language in a lease, and I don't have that with the master landlord, who is Kimco, was Kimco up to 2 weeks ago. What I have in my lease is what I'm coming in front of you with.
Okay.
You have made a prior determination and a finding that this sign, as it is now, is acceptable with respect to the size, number of signs, and its relative distraction and non-distraction to the motoring public going by. You have not changed that, because now you've simply said on the other side they can put a different sign, but that doesn't change the dynamic of how many signs and the distraction level. So if one of these others goes out, then if they wanted to, they could go down to that other one, but there would be no reason for you to require that to be done, because it wouldn't change the calculus of what you've already found to be appropriate with respect to this many panels, this size panels.
So what the distraction would be if one of the other stores split in half, and then they're like, hey, Aldi's put their sign on the other side, and we'll have the same agreement by flipping it every now and then. There's a distraction being added by allowing them to flip the sign at any period of time.
The distraction of the hour or two that it takes to go ahead and flip the
Yes.
sign?
Yes.
Well, I mean, it will have to be defended on a rational basis as to whether or not that's rationally a distraction to the public versus whenever any other signs or light poles are being changed or light bulbs are being changed within poles.
There's 8 tenants, right?
Yeah.
So if 8 tenants decided to cut themselves in half and then share the other side, now it's 8 times a year, 8 hours, or so many years.
But that's not being requested now, and it may never be
But
requested.
it's a precedent that we may be setting.
Oh, no, it doesn't set a precedent that this can happen on every single one. If at some point in time people want to keep changing signs and you think it's breached a confusion level for the public, you can say that's enough. We're not going to allow any more of this. We're only going to allow this one, or we're only going to allow 2. You don't have to allow it for everything else simply because you've done it here.
Wasn't it 6 panels at once? Wasn't it 6 panels at once? Yeah. All right. Anybody have any other questions for the consultant or the applicant? Or any good questions or concerns they'd like to bring up? Okay. What's the board's overall feeling?
Well, we have to refer them to the ZBA.
Yeah, well, we have to do both. We have to either do an approval of disapproval or an approval.
Well, no, I don't think we do.
Yeah, no, we have to do a draft. We could do a draft.
You have to give me some direction
Right.
if you want. You don't have to, but typically you'd give me some direction as to going ahead and drafting a resolution. The sense that I'm getting from the board, and you never have to take a vote on this, but the sense I'm getting from the board is that with some conditions, this board would be acceptable provided that they have a variance. So we wouldn't start preparing that until we got notice of the variance to make sure that there wasn't something else that should be put in the resolution. But the next time they came back before you, we could have a resolution ready for an approval with conditions. So I think what the chairman is asking is everybody satisfied with respect to the conditions that are discussed, one of which is still up in the air, so I need some direction on that with respect to the frequency of things being changed. The condition that we discussed tonight is that the size of the sign must be the same as that approved. But whether or not you're going to allow this flipping, and if so, whether or not every 6 months, for instance, was acceptable to you, and if so, is that just for 2 or 3 years, or is that forever, or whatever? That's the part that I don't have yet from anybody, and if there's any other conditions that people want.
I would be fine with every 6 months for 2 years. The applicant, you brought that up, that you set the 2 years. You thought that that was substantial, or satisfactory, right? You said the first 2 years.
Yes, I may have said 2 to 3 years, yes.
Okay, I said 2, but okay.
That's fine.
2 or 3 years, but no more than once every 6 months.
I can give you once every 6 months for 2
I
years.
agree.
For 3 years, is what you're saying?
twice every 6 months for a period of 2 years.
2 years.
Yes.
Anything else?
Who's going to do, Natalie do the referral to the ZBA?
We will do that.
Any other conditions, or, again, we're not approving the resolution tonight, we're just asking the council to draft a potential resolution of approval based on the variance, if they can get their variance.
Do we need a motion on that?
You need a mo-
Usually have a motion to authorize me to draft a resolution.
I'll make the motion to authorize council for a draft resolution of approval based on the conditions we discussed tonight.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And then Natalie will do your referral to the ZBA.
Okay,
So we'll see you in a few months.
sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. Woodbury Commons Monument Sign, review application received for an amended site plan to include an additional freestanding sign to be located at the Ninninger Road entry. Said property is located off of Route 32 in Central Valley and is known as the Village of Woodbury Tax Map, Section 225, Block 1, Lot 70.2, Section 226, Block 1, Lot 1.
Good evening, Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the board. Jennifer Kinerick from Price, Me, Shulman, and DiArminio. On behalf of the applicant, Premium Outlet Partners, commonly known as Simon. Nice to see everybody again. Good to be back here. Hope you all had a happy holidays. The first application, we have two on for this evening, so you're going to hear me twice, unfortunately. For the first application, we're seeking approval for a second monument sign at the future Ninninger Road entrance. This was previously reviewed by this board in July. We were referred to the ZBA for variance relief because only one monument sign is permitted on a single property in this zone. Applicant obtained variance relief for that signage from the ZBA back in November, and now we're back before this board to seek approval for the proposed monument sign. Just to give you a little bit of a background, the proposed sign is identical in size, materials, and construction as the existing monument sign that is located at the north entry on Route 32, except this sign, instead of being double-sided, will be one-sided. The sign will be located in an existing landscaping bed that will abut a service court and will not interfere with any sight lines at that said intersection. The measurements will be approximately 80 square feet overall area. The message copy area itself will measure 38 square feet, and the sign height overall would be 11 feet 10 inches from grade. And we did receive a report from H2M dated November 27, 2019. I don't know if at this point you wanted them to go over the comments.
Yep, Natalie.
Okay, as Jennifer already stated, they have received ZBA relief for the second freestanding sign contingent on approval from the Planning and Architectural Review Boards. It appears the second sign will serve more as a welcome sign versus a directional sign directing traffic to the common. We just note that for your information. Furthermore, they advise that the second sign is going to be exactly the same in size, materials, colors, although we recommend you confirm lighting will be the same. Furthermore, the applicant has requested in their correspondence that since the Route 32 sign was approved under zoning and ARB criteria, that this be considered for an administrative review and approval through the building permit process. We recommend that you discuss this with council and note that while code provisions for ARB allow a public hearing to be waived, the same does not appear to be true for plans. And other than that, we really don't have any other comments.
And if I just may interject on that, I had the opportunity to speak with Kelly Naughton from Rick Golden's office, and I concur with that.
That it's required.
Correct.
Okay. I thought you were concurring with that it was up to us to.
No, I had the opportunity to talk to Kelly earlier
Okay,
today.
sounds good. Just 4 points. One, there was an issue about whether or not this really needed planning board approval versus building inspector approval, and our advice to you is that it does need planning board approval pursuant to 2 separate provisions in the code, because this sign is in relation to pending site plan and coordinate with that, as well as there's another provision, 310-45, which appears to apply. So it's properly before you, and you have to make this determination. The next is seeker, and we believe that this is a relatively modest sign, simply duplicating one at a different entrance, and given the overall size of the plan and what was studied generally for this Woodbury Common as far as seeker, that you can simply reaffirm your seeker findings that I think it'd be appropriate that this sign would not make a material adverse environmental impact from the seeker findings previously done. 39 referral is required and must be accomplished, and Natalie can notify the building department to send that out. If it hasn't been already, I'm not aware that it has been, but if it has, fine. If it hasn't, then it will be referred out. And finally, that you need to set up today.
What was the last point, Rick?
Public hearing.
Public hearing, right? Any questions for the applicant with the sign?
Yes, I saw the structure up many, many weeks ago on the Ivan Road extension. Was that just testing the area where it was? It disappeared, it's not there anymore.
Good evening, John Villapiano, Vice President Development with Premium Outlet Partners. No, the sign is still up. It's covered though, per the
Oh, it is?
per the building inspector. Yes.
Camouflage pretty good, because I couldn't tell it was there anymore.
Yeah.
But I did see the structure, and it did look very acceptable. It was not, something that would be an eyesore, so it looked well there. And I don't know whether you even can see it from 32, but you can see it from the thruway and the Niger Extension Road. Yeah, okay. Go ahead.
Yes, the sign is really directed for people coming in through the new entry off an Inninger Road. It does have visibility from the thruway and maybe even 17 if you crank your head in that direction, but it's really meant as Natalie mentioned, as an entry feature, welcoming customers that are making use of that new entrance.
Yeah, it was fine with me as far as the appearance of it where it was. It looked very good there. That's all.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Again, I saw it before it got covered up too. I don't see it as being a big deal. So with that said, I will need a motion and a second to reconfirm seeker for this applicant.
I'll make that motion.
I have a second.
Second.
Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. So now you do the 239, you gotta set a public hearing. All right, gotta look at dates. So it'd be- All right, so January 1st is going to be canceled, that's New Year's Day. So it'd be January 15th would be the day, would be public hearing. Is that ready? The closest I got.
Can't do the 18th of December?
I've got a bunch of other stuff in the works for that night for the agenda, and to be honest, I don't think I'm gonna have the time that night to get it on. I have a couple of big projects that night already in the queue.
Is it possible for the board to authorize a draft of the resolution to also be considered at that meeting?
Rick, we've done that before, right? All right.
Obviously, it depends upon the complexities involved, but this does not seem to involve that many complexities. You know, the sign has been vetted by the CBA, who has given them a variance for this sign. It's the same sign as they have elsewhere on the site. So I think this very few moving parts, and if the planning board wants, they can authorize the resolution ready for the January 15th, 2020 meeting.
I'll make the motion that we have council approve a draft resolution ready for January 15th.
I second it.
Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And then I need also a motion to set a public hearing for the night of January 15th.
I'll make the motion.
Can I have a second? Second. Thank you, sir. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you for your accommodation.
Don't go anywhere.
I'm not.
Next item on the agenda, Woodbury Commons Suite 315 rebuild, review application received for amended site plan for the demolition of building Suite 315 and construction of new building at existing site. Said property is located off Route 32 in Central Valley, is known on the Village of Woodbury tax maps as sections 225, Block 1, Lot 70.2, and sections 226, Block 1, Lot 1.
Good evening, Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the board. Jennifer Kinerick from Price Me, Shulman, and Arminio. We represent the applicant and owner, Premium Outlet Partners, commonly referred to as Simon Outlet Center. We're seeking approval to rebuild what is known as Suite 315 at the center. This existing Suite 315 currently consists of 4,754 square feet. We're proposing to demolish same and construct a new building totaling 6,032 square feet. It will be constructed in the same location as the former building, and the expansion footprint will extend into pedestrian promenades and service court, but will ensure that ESO has a full maneuverability throughout those areas. The proposed building will comply with all applicable code and prior approvals, specifically with the approved finishes and materials that have been used in the Hudson Valley District location of the center. We also received a report from H2N for this application dated November 27, 2019. If the board wants to hear comments from H2M at this time.
All right, now go ahead.
Okay, as Jennifer just stated, the applicant is proposing to demolish and reconstruct a retail store, which is a permitted use in the zone. The existing interior space is 4,754 square feet, and the rebuild will have a 6,032 square foot footprint. As with prior applications for revision to space in this manner, we recommend the applicant provide a table indicating the specific GLA. They're accustomed to providing this for our review, and we look forward to receiving that. The new plan includes a storage space, which appears to be accessible from the new Suite 315 and the service court. We recommend that this space will solely be used for Suite 315. Otherwise, the for tenant storage space come into play. We recommend that the utility details be submitted an engineering plan showing the sanitary, gas, water, and drainage with sufficient detail on the exterior grading to confirm there will be no issues with ponding. Jennifer advised that there will be no disruption to ESO access. However, we recommend that be shown on a plan for confirmation, and also the plan be referred to the ESOs for their comments. We did note that it appears that the extension in the service court may cause disruption to access and deliveries to the adjacent store 321. We just recommend this be confirmed, and if so, corrected if needed. And finally, with respect to the ARB, the material board for the Red Apple Court and Hudson Valley portion of Woodbury Commons is provided. However, we believe that the specific materials for this store should be noted. And otherwise, we don't have any other comments at this time.
And just for the record, we take no issue with what was stated by your by your engineer.
Very good.
I just have three brief points. One is with respect to seeker again, given what's being altered, which is replacement, although it is, there are some larger implications. You can go ahead and reaffirm your prior seeker findings, as it does not appear that the net difference in the two is something that would rise to a significant adverse environmental impact, given the extensive findings that were previously done for this project. It is required to be referred to under GML 239, so that needs to be done, and a public hearing is required and cannot be waived.
Start at the end again.
Start with me.
Yes, yes, sir.
The gross leasable space, is that going to increase in any way with this? Or is it still within the parameters of 2012?
Yep, we've requested that the applicant provide the summary for us, and we will confirm that it's within the allowable. That's already been approved.
Okay, thank
If
you.
there's changes, they'll bring it up before you.
Okay,
And we concur with that.
okay.
I had the same question. Looks like there's a small addition there. You could go check it out.
We'll provide the GLA tabulation as is custom with all of our build-outs.
Yeah, I had that same question, plus on the, what is it, page 3 of what you had given us, on the proposed, can you tell me what the square footage of the 321 and 410 are going to be?
Is it the adjacent tenants?
Yeah, the
You're
one,
looking for the square footage of the adjacent tenants?
Yeah, the two, you have it on existing, but it's not on the proposed, what's,
Well, there are just going to be no changes to those tenant suites by virtue of this proposal. So we're not proposing any changes to those. It's solely suite 315.
so 315's coming out into the walkway in both, in forward and on both sides then?
Yes, on all sides. There are existing landscape beds that protrude out into the path currently. We'll be essentially cutting into those. We're not touching any of the approved ESO, but we'll provide a plan that details that.
Are those on page 4, are those two, I guess, those semicircles? in the
Yes,
building?
exactly.
okay, because those footprints, they don't look alike. You're saying that nothing's changing, but it doesn't. On page 3. The left to the right.
So if I may, I think it would be easiest to look at where the end of 321 is on the existing plan versus the new. And then if you follow down, you'll see how space 315 now almost matches up with the facade on the right hand.
Right.
So that's the increase of space on that side.
Okay.
And then on the left side, there's almost like a vacancy, like a little corridor, but now 315 will match up with 410 there.
If you're looking around here, this perimeter, it's not very discernible because it's around the whole 3 walls of the tenant space. The bigger upgrade, the bigger expansion is up here.
The suite 315 goes to 6,032 square feet, and that's because of the small addition in the alleyway and as well as to the right. Right? I mean, that's a 12,
If you look,
I mean, the front wall comes out flush with the,
if you look at page 4, it's an overlay. You can see the existing perimeter of the merchandising floor.
yeah.
And all facades, east, west, south, will be coming out further than they exist today.
Right, plus.
The
on page-
adjacent suites will not be touched.
On page 4, you're missing the pop out up on in the alleyway there, right?
That is a good point. Yes. We'll correct that.
And on the next mission, is it possible you can, the actual distance you're coming out from the existing?
We'll have it dimensioned.
Okay, thank you.
So you're tearing down the existing building and building a new building. You've said that already, but I'm just repeating it.
Yes. Seems to be the new protocol here at Woodbury Common. If you haven't seen Michael Kors, they just opened a few weeks ago, and it's dynamite.
So it's more of an increase than I thought it was originally. It's almost 1,300 square feet.
It's 1,278, yes.
So that's significant.
It is, but it's still within the approved GLA, and we'll provide documentation of that.
That's what we need to see, because there's like GLAs, that'll be on the next schedule. And then the other things we asked about, the corrections to the dimensions and the corrections to the hallway.
Yes.
I need an ARB application too, I didn't get one. I got your
Yep,
sample board, but no ARB,
okay,
so we need that too.
we'll provide.
Yeah, just two things. You said there's no changes between 21 and 410?
That's correct.
Yeah, you have the access doors on the proposed, chart 3? Yeah, if there's no change, I like to see it on the existing one, on the next drawing. If the doors are in the same place,
Okay, so I understood. Okay,
this way, when you say there's no change, the doors will be in the same place?
yes,
And then I think you have a typo. It says 410 on proposed, but it says 401 on existing. See,
yes, I see,
that's a typo, right?
yes. That's all me. I'm glad you can't hear us till the 15th. You give me plenty of time to fix
We'll
it.
make sure there's nothing in the building yet, okay?
Anybody have any questions for the applicant?
I have a question for Natalie. Natalie, on your report, you mentioned something about 3 signs. That may be an issue.
Yes, we actually reviewed the approved signage plan for Woodbury Common, and as long as the applicant confirms that those signs are acceptable per that plan, then we think it would be okay. The specific language does say that you can have an additional signs if it's visible from the surrounding roads, not necessarily from the pedestrian access. So I think that the applicant should review that and discuss that with you further.
Thank you.
We'll take a look, but this building is not visible from any public right-of-way. It's basically as close to the heart of the center as you can get. And as is typical with our sign code and other centers, as well as other tenant suites here, tenants with multiple facade faces, so not inline tenants. These are corner tenants. They typically have one sign on each facade. We'll take a look and review our code or the approved plan for that.
Okay, thank you.
Have any other questions for the applicant?
Well, the one on the height, does that change from what it exists now, or?
Yes, the elevations which we provided in the packet, those will all be changing. We're not proposing exceeding the 35-foot limit per code.
You'll have the height on the next?
We will, yes, we could provide updated elevations with
Thank you.
materials and heights.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions, concerns, any other one?
I'm out.
You good? Good. Okay, so I will make a motion to reaffirm Sika. Can I get a second?
I'll second.
Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that'll lead to the GML 239 and the ESO referrals, correct?
Yes.
And then I will need a motion and a second to set it'd be, Rick, it's be public hearing and ARB review on the 15th, right? Both?
Excuse me?
Public hearing and ARB review on the 15th?
It's a public hearing for both the site plan as
And-
well as the ARB. yes.
Okay. So you'll have the ARB application and all that in before, right?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And could we request a draft resolution for that as well, if it's not too onerous for Rick?
How's the board feel about that?
Seems to be a lot more with this one, it's not just like a slam dunk.
Yeah, I want to see the rest of the drawings
All right.
myself. Is anybody else?
Yeah, I want to see all the.
Okay. So I need a motion and a second for a public hearing on January 15th.
Make that motion.
I'll second.
All right. Any questions? All in favor? Aye.
Can I just ask what your meeting schedule is for the remainder of January?
Oh, right now it's just the 15th,
It's just-
and I will let you know if another meeting, yeah, because of the holiday on.
Yeah, well, that's why I asked, because
Yeah.
January 1st
And
is
there's
a
5
no-go.
Wednesdays.
So if one gets added, we'll let the building department know, and then they'll let you guys know.
Sounds like
I
a
gotta
plan.
check with the board.
Understood.
everybody's schedules,
All
okay?
right. Everybody have a good evening.
You too, take care.
All right, have a good evening.
Next item on the agenda tonight, Central Valley Property Management, review of amended plans received for various site plan amendments and special permit to include personal service use, an existing structure, Old TD Bank. Said property is located at 252-260 Route 32, Central Valley, is known as the Village of Woodbury Tax Map, Sections 230, Block 7, Lot 17, 18, and 19.
Good evening, Steve Esposito representing Central Valley Property Management. We're here for amended site plan, special use permit. One of the things that we're seeking is a change in the approved uses. As you know, it's a mixed-use building, and the originally approved uses were retail, office, restaurant, and residential. We'd like to add a personal service as another permitted use. It's permitted use in the HB zone. The bulk requirements and lot use and lot areas are similar to retail and office. And we have a tenant that's hot to trot to get into the building that's been vacant for several years. So that's one of the reasons why we're here. There's also some amendments to the site plans, which we outlined, actually H2O outlined in their previous letter, and then we reconfirmed them in our current transmittal letter to you, dated the 12th.
This current application for amendment was considered on November 6th, at which time you reconfirmed seeker and a public hearing was held. At that time, you requested a revised pedestrian access plan and a revised narrative for traffic and parking demands, both which have been received. The new pedestrian entrance consists of a parallel sidewalk to the existing with individual access to each storefront. It appears this will provide ADA access to both the rear and front of the building. We do recommend that the applicant provide a profile showing the grade change from the street to the building as well as horizontally, just so that you can confirm safety and that that's appropriate.
Natalie,
Sure.
whereabouts would you like that taken?
You could do it, I think the center of the building would be appropriate for showing the change in grade from the street up, and then obviously in the front of, it would be basically from the street, you'll show that.
Okay.
We refer to your traffic consultant on the traffic and parking study submitted, but note that the applicant is requesting the board reconfirm the original waiver for 9 spaces. As noted in the recent correspondence from the applicant that was submitted on November 27th, there have been changes to the approved plan for the mixed-use portion of the application, including an increase in the building to accommodate a sprinkler room and an elevator. We recommend the applicant discuss why these features were not accommodated in the approved envelope, aside from the loss of leasable space, which is the obvious reason. Furthermore, we recommend that the applicant confirm the degree of change in the building footprint. They have indicated that this is approximately 104 square feet, but our measurements show an increase by approximately 252, not including the footprint of the stairs that were approved previously. Other changes to the approved plan include modifications to the curb ramp at the southeast corner of the personal service use, the concrete pads at the northeast corner of the personal service, and also the transformer pad. We note that the impact of these changes is important in consideration of coverage, access to the building, and to and from the loading dock and the maneuvering in and out. We recommend that you receive advice from counsel on how to proceed. With the changes to the site plan, the applicant should confirm the coverage calculation does include the new sidewalk, the large building footprint, and the other impervious surfaces added to the plan. Finally, the applicant is also seeking a modification to the ARB approval for the white trim around the second-story windows in lieu of the black that was previously approved. We recommend that any other changes be discussed at this time, including the changes to the light fixtures, door trim, and other impacts related to the building footprint. We do understand that the applicant is looking to proceed with the ARB and also the change in to the personal service use. You can consider that as well as the other changes to the existing plan, but I think, you know, all these issues need to be addressed. So that's all I have for the moment.
Rick? I'll get to you, John. What's up?
Yes, I need to confirm with the applicant, these changes that are noted on here from the original site plan, these have already been accomplished? in the field? Like the building is larger than what was approved?
Correct.
and-
The building is larger than what was approved. The original approval of the site plan approval was granted. The building, at that time, it was they weren't sure whether there was going to be required elevator or not, or sprinklers. During the building permit review, it was determined, based on input by the state building department, that an elevator was required, and that sprinklers would also be required.
Okay, but what happens when an applicant has made changes to a previously approved site plan and constructed them is that you now must consider whether or not you're in agreement with those, whether or not you, not considering really whether or not, for the most part, they were or were not constructed. So you don't sort of give them a pass because they've already been constructed and be expensive to take down. And nor do you, usually, you do not punish an applicant for building something that they did not have authorization to. However, the one caveat on that is, and I think it's up to the board to listen to the explanation in any more detail than the applicant wants to give, is with respect to the good faith or bad faith of the applicant in doing that. So, for example, if there was a good faith error of building this not in accordance with the approved plans, then you can go ahead and if you think that what has been done seems appropriate and you would have approved it, then you can go ahead and approve it. If you think that there was some bad faith involved, and I'm not ascribing that to the applicant, but I'm just talking generally with respect to these types of issues, that you can, on occasion, say, we're not going to approve this because of your bad faith. Doesn't happen often, and usually it has to be fairly substantial and egregious. But that's the context upon which you should be reviewing applicants who go ahead and build something that was not in accordance with the approved site plan. So I think you need to listen to the applicant and their reason for that, and then go ahead and determine whether or not you're going to go ahead and approve the changes that were made, not in accordance with the site plan. And the only other comment I'll make is with respect to the public hearing. The public hearing was held and closed. It does not appear to me, but this is your decision, that these changes are the sort that would require a new public hearing. I mean, they're not of such a substantial nature that you would necessarily have new comments coming in because the footprint was enlarged a little bit more than what it was from the approval. So typically, this would not be the type of case where you would require a new public hearing be set with respect to these changes in the amendment.
But what about with the ARB portion where the windows were approved as black and they're white now?
Again, if you think that that's substantial enough that you think that it would help you make the determination and inform your decision-making to have the public, because black versus white is substantial in your mind, then you can require an ARB, new ARB public hearing to gain input from the public on that. For instance, if the difference was not coal black and white, but was instead 2 shades of gray, you may determine that it really isn't that substantial to require a new public hearing. But if you believe that the contrast between the approved and the proposed is that significant, then you can require a new public hearing on the ARB.
John, do you have anything to add with the parking with the personal use addition?
The last time here, we requested a narrative that's been provided. We just will suggest that that portion of that narrative should be incorporated into any resolution. Namely, the fact is that 25 children, each would be accompanied by a parent or guardian, and the fact is that there would be at least a 30-minute time between the beginning of one and the end of one and the beginning of the next one. We looked at the parking, the 20 spaces, and the parking analysis was fine. We concur with the 5 land bank spaces, although we question why even do any land banking, especially for 4 spaces that are on the opposite side. There's 1 space all by itself. It's maybe just as easy to build it now instead of coming back and disrupt it. But I'll let the applicant talk to that point. And the waiver, we would concur with the stipulation that we have this time gap between the end of one and the beginning of the next one. We're fine with the waiver.
Thank you. All right, a lot of moving pieces here. So let's talk about the sprinkler room and the elevator first.
I don't, if you, this is, if you look at the sheet, C100, you'll see that's what should,
Steve, can you take
C100, you have those were the existing enclosed stairs. So that feature was part of the original approved architecture. On the south side of the building, when it was determined that the elevator was required, the elevator was put there because it could be interconnected to the access from the stairway because it's a center hall. So that was there. There's also the equipment room and electronic room. That's the equipment that's associated with that is also adjacent to the elevator shaft. And then on the north side of the building is where the sprinkler room was added, which includes the backflow preventer and pump.
Now that's in one of the first existing. No, it's added on.
It was added on to that. It made this stairway grow as well. So that's where the additional space is.
Any reason why we just didn't put it in the back of one of the stores?
And this is a question of Barry, but I do believe that there has to be exterior access to the fire department to that room.
Barry Tarek, architect. Didn't want to commit the access to the sprinkler to one particular unit, which may or may not be occupied at any given time. So we put it as an external access for the sprinkler. Also, I just want to blanket all this. We're looking at what I think are 3 changes that affect the architectural review. And none of them were actually made in bad faith. The situation with the elevator, I emailed the Department of State actually, because though it may seem clear as to whether elevators are needed or not, this particular situation where there was no residential provided on the grade level, but there was more than 4 units provided on the upper level. It was unclear as to whether we needed the elevator. I emailed back and forth with the DOS and actually have the emails, which I'm happy to provide, where they say we do not need the elevator. So we proceeded with the design and the drawings, and then Gary Thomasberger interpreted the code differently. At that point, I consulted Dominic Marinelli, who actually wrote the code for New York State, and we did in fact need the elevator. So it happened that late in the progress, way after everything was approved by the board. So just so you know, that's how that happened.
Is the second floor more than 3,000 square feet?
Say again?
Is the second floor more than 3,000 square feet?
It is, and I know where you're going with that, but we found as the Department of State agreed with us, that an elevator wasn't required.
But is that why Gary said it was required, because of the aggregate area?
I'm not, Gary was going with the number of units that we were providing.
Okay.
So, and I think it is more than 4 in a building. But it becomes dicey as to whether there's grade level access. The way New York State writes the code is if you provide an elevator, you need to provide accessible units. And it's kind of a backwards logic, but that's the way it's written.
That's a good point. Are those accessible units? Is one
Yeah.
accessible?
Yeah.
Oh, good. That's good to hear.
Yeah. Yeah, they're all accessible.
They all.
Yeah. Yeah, so once we provide the elevator, we made the entire building accessible. So everything was done not in bad faith. We tried to do the right thing with that, and it happened very late in the game.
Now, was the fire department consulted where the FTC was located? Did we ask the fire department if the FTC is okay where it is? 'Cause I know the pump room can't move, but potentially the hookup can move.
Oh.
Hi, Jerry Cassessa. I'm one of the builders on the project. The location for the Siamese connection was actually field located with Gary Thomasberger, and he told us exactly where he wanted it. It's actually on the front corner of the building, which is right here. Okay. So that was reviewed and approved. Again, in the field, though.
So let's talk, questions on the elevator and pump room. Let's stay there for right now.
Stay there? Well, they're there now.
I understand they're there, but we still, I mean,
So I think it's,
Well, I think the purpose of it is good. It should have been, proper procedure should have been followed, but it's not for a bad reason. It's to help the handicap have access to those apartments. So that could be forgiven.
I'm not gonna say anything against a life safety device with the sprinkler rooms. Sandy? So, Rick, do we need to make a motion to accept the changes for both the elevator and the pump room? Are we doing this piece by piece, or are we doing the whole thing?
Well, I mean, they are presenting this as, these are all the changes that they want made. If there are changes that you're not going to agree with, then we need to identify specificity. If you're going to agree to all of the changes being proposed, then this will simply be an approval and based upon the revised plans that are before you.
Okay.
so I have a question about the lot coverage then and stormwater management. Is that addressed in some way?
Do you want to? Dennis?
I think the applicant needs to confirm that the impervious coverage is still within the maximum of 75%. Again, we think that it should include the new sidewalk, all the additional concrete pads. We don't expect that there would be an issue, but it should be confirmed by them.
I can tell you that, it's the existing building that's there today, the concrete pads, the 2 additional parking spaces we're proposing to install now.
Yeah.
I can't confirm that the additional sidewalk in the front of the building is included in that, but right now we're at 76% lot coverage, and we can go to 75%, so a couple hundred square feet of sidewalk I think will be safe, but we'll confirm that.
And you'll have an updated table that will...
Yes, yeah.
Well, but how is the stormwater being handled now? Is it just going out to municipal? How is it on site and all that jazz?
Well,
The pavement?
the additional sidewalk right here is really just going to pitch into the planting beds.
Well, yeah, all the water in the back is going under the parking lot?
Oh, yeah, there's catch basins,
Okay.
storm collection system.
So that increased area doesn't change the size of that system?
I think it would be minimal where they've provided a comprehensive slip that was reviewed and approved and had no additional comments based on what was previously reviewed. The applicant could confirm and update that as needed, but I think as long as, if you want that done, then that's at your discretion.
Well, it's, I don't know, 500 square feet more? Does that
Well,
tilt the scale in some
percentage-wise,
way?
we're at about 1.3%. 1.3% greater than the original.
1.3%? Man, that's way over.
So,
Windows.
Tear them out.
I'll start. It's a big building. The white stands out. I mean, it just adds draw to the building. I think the black would have at least, I don't know, minimized the sight of that from the street level and outside, so.
Well, there's a combination. The storefront windows below, they're going to be black, and now you have these white windows above.
Yeah.
That's kind of. Can you paint them?
What's the remedy? I mean,
Yeah. What are the options? Architect.
I guess physically they could be painted. The problem with that is the white grill is between the glass.
yeah.
I'm sure you're familiar with the product, so I have not figured out how to remedy that.
Sandy? I'm getting you started. I kicked the door open. Go ahead.
I too believe they should be what we approved, but if they're in there now I'm starting to think if I mean, they are where the tenants are, they're on the upstairs. So with the sunlight that beats down on there in the summertime, the white may be better for the tenants.
That's actually what the discussion was. Not knowing that the ARB had black windows, talked to the client about it. These are an Anderson window. They're a 100 series. They are a composite, which essentially the inside and outside are the same color, including the grills. So from inside the apartment, the center units here, you actually have 3 windows with grills that would have all been black from the inside, as well as these 2 windows here in the large living space. And it just seemed like a lot of black from the inside. I just thought that white would be better for the occupants of the apartments, not having it black inside. A lot of black trim seemed to be overpowering.
Okay, but so now, are you saying that this wasn't a mistake, this was an intentional?
This was an intentional selection for white windows, not knowing that black was approved.
Well, not,
Okay,
I mean,
not-
not knowing is
And
is
the
not
way
an answer.
the way we found out is actually we started talking about, I believe it was we asked about the signage and lighting, and talked to Gary about it. He said, well, actually, that was all approved part of the ARB, and he gave us the paperwork. And as soon as I saw the paperwork, I ran down the list of things that were approved, and we said, oh, windows black. And I basically spoke to Gary, and he said, well, you have to go back to the planning board ARB, and that's where we are. So it wasn't intentional. It wasn't that it was, in bad intent. We made a decision to make the windows white because of the way.
But when you have to go and receive ARB approval, what does it mean if you're not gonna, look at that before you even break ground for the building? If we as a board are giving you permission to do something or instructing you to do it a certain way, and you're gonna just go build it and then say, oh, I better look at this.
Right. I understand that, but the colors that were shown initially were not by the direction of the ARB. Did you guys pick black and ask it to
No,
be
you
black?
would have come to us.
You wouldn't have done
You
that.
came to us with an ARB
Right,
application.
Okay. All right, okay.
And you would have said, this is the color of the trim, this is the color of the windows, this is the color of the brick.
Right.
We didn't pick any of this. You came to us and said, can we have this built? And this board, and I wasn't on the board, and Joe wasn't on the board at the time, but this board of members said, okay, sure, that looks good, and this is what we're gonna approve. Now we're talking about 27 windows, give or take, my math may be off.
Whatever, yeah.
That have been in over a month, and now we're all like, oops. I mean, to me, it changes the entire look of the building there.
It does change.
And, I think and I don't want to speak for anybody on the board, but I think the original intention of this board was to make this building blend into as much of that area as possible. And now having the contrasting white over black, to me, it's just like, hi, I'm here. So I'm not in favor of going with allowing the white windows to stay.
I think it should be as we approved it.
Yes. Sorry?
I agree, and I'd be willing to talk about just, is there a compromise position here about the front facade and the side facade and leaving the back facade, or is that something we'd be willing to entertain?
What are the windows? The windows are on the side on the second floor too, right?
And in the back of the building too, right?
Or what's in the back? The same thing, the white?
Right. In the back of the building, the back and front are identical.
Okay.
As far as they look. The sides, there are one window on each end.
There's storefront in the back as well?
Yes,
And
yeah.
in black? And it
Well,
was-
we haven't ordered anything at this point.
You gotta read the information from
Right.
months ago now.
Right.
It's okay.
Right.
I agree. I don't like the black and white contrast, and I don't particularly. I think the black was sharp before. The fact that it's black on the inside is really just a window manufacturer selection. Doesn't have any. You can buy windows that have, exterior and interior colors that are different. That is not. That's not an issue for me. But I understand this problem, and it's not done in bad faith, as we said before. It was just an oversight. But there have been a couple oversights with this project.
Yeah.
The sidewalks, you know, being one, the square footage areas, so there's been a couple of them. And they start to add up after a while, and this one is gonna be there forever. And that's the part that I start to get a little concerned about.
I think the black windows blended in with the former bank building, and that was rather appealing. It was more unified. So I would vote for the black trim, what that was originally agreed for.
Anything else you guys want to?
Can we talk about the 4 facades? Is it a possibility to keep the rear facade, which is not really visible from 32, and just mitigate the front facade along 32 in the north and south?
I mean, it's visible from the people that live back there, so it's not that it's not visible. There is a residential neighborhood back there, and people that do look at it. It's a house that, butts right up to it. I mean, I'm for uniformity, but whatever everybody else.
So the applicant wants to put the white windows in the back, is that what you're saying?
They're white, they're there now.
Oh.
They're all
they're
there.
there already.
All the
right.
second-story windows are all installed.
And it's a portion of the rear of the building where before we found out that they had to be black, are also bricked in the back. So we have to paint it.
Bricked in? There are windows that you did not install that were on the plan originally, is that what I'm hearing?
I'm sorry?
There are windows that you did not install that were originally on the plan? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm sorry. So, the brick facade is built.
Can you speak into the mic?
Brickwork has
okay.
started, the brickwork
finished
has
work.
started.
Finished, yeah.
When we found out, we stopped the brickwork. We came to we stopped the brickwork. We did not release the storefront because we knew we had a problem. We actually stopped that portion of the job. But at that point, I believe there's about 6 windows across the back that the brick is completed from the grade to the roof line.
Is there anything in the back that's black, any trim? I know we see the black on the front, but is there anything, or is it just going to be all white in the back as you're proposing?
Oh, the bottom's all black, right?
Well, they haven't purchased them in white.
This can all be white if the issue is that it has to be uniform, then all this, including the storefront, would be white. And that's the education building.
I think black was approved in the front. I'm trying to help you guys out here with the back area.
Okay.
That's,
So the back should be all white?
I'm trying to find a solution for you that helps you. I mean, we can go nuclear and be like, no, replace them all.
It's not about going nuclear. It's about uniformity of the building.
All right,
And
all right.
what the original approval and look of the building
Yeah.
was. This is not trying to, it's just,
Okay, I agree.
but I get what you're saying, and, but what do you feel?
Uniformity, it's the uniformity.
Yeah, I go with what we approved originally.
So Rick, how do we handle that?
The applicant would need to submit a new ARB materials form. Steve, just so that you hear it. The applicant would need to submit a new ARB materials form. I guess no, since you're not changing
No.
any of it. So it'll be the same, so that the approval with respect to the windows is going to remain the same. So that's not going, do you have that listed in any plans that were submitted?
Yes.
The new plans were submitted with that change?
In our transmittal, we had broke it out as the
Right, so what
ARB.
would have to happen then, Steve, is that, assuming that the board is fine with the other changes that you're requesting, then you simply have to resubmit, not showing any changes with respect to the windows, and note someplace in the plan saying that the windows are remaining as originally.
So we still have, I think, Rick came out with 3 more things. We have the personal use change, the parking, and then we have the the switchbacks or the entrance? We were talking about the staircases?
They're gone, aren't they?
Yeah, okay.
There's the land banking of the parking though, that's.
Right, okay, so next let's talk about the change in the use space for TD Bank to personal use. We have an applicant that wants to put a child's bounce play area in there. I am definitely, and I'm concerned about parking. Having two small children going to these things, there's always overlap. There's always seems to be no place to park when if there is or isn't parties going on. I've never not been to one before that parking is just not an issue at.
I have a question for Natalie on that. Natalie, on the last page of your memo, under special permit,
Yes.
Maximum of 25 children, well, you have 2 to 8, but on the narrative, I think it says 2 to 12 years old, accompanied by an adult would be expected. But this is what I'm not getting clear from you, but not at the same time. I think what we were told was the adult has to stay there with the child.
Yeah, that's what the original applicant said, the kids
Right.
would be unaccompanied.
I think that's a typo, and it would be as the applicant has described in his narrative.
Okay.
Yes, I'm sorry if we
Okay, and the
reiterated
building
that.
code limits a maximum of 49, but if it's 25 with a parent,
50.
so that's 50, and then 3 employees, so that's 53, so we're already over the maximum on the code, right?
Your children don't drive.
The what?
Your children and parent come in the same car.
No, I'm talking about the maximum amount of people in there.
In the building, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Typically, what happens is that many of the children don't come individually, they come with siblings or friends. So, I would bring my child and a younger brother, younger sister, and that's pretty much, industry standard. So that's why we're very comfortable with the number of required parking spaces.
I'm not talking about the parking, I'm talking about the occupancy of the building.
Correct, and the same thing would apply. In other words, you may have 20 or 25 children there, but you're not going to have 20 or 25 adults. They will have come, partnered up.
So I think basically the code permits a maximum of 49 people. And I think that you are in a position where you could impose reasonable restrictions on the number of children that you think would be appropriate to come, knowing that they may be accompanied by their parents.
Yeah, I think we have to think in the maximum, right? A may or may not
Sure.
is something that I think we have to, if it's 25, I think we have to assume then that it's 50. 25 children and 25 parents.
I think one thing that you have to consider, though, is the practical enforceability of this.
Right.
So I think it would be problematic for Gary to go ahead and constantly try to figure out of the maximum number of people there, how many are children and how many are not. Everybody's used to, maximum occupancy and can easily determine whether or not that's exceeded or not exceeded. But to try to put this max children versus adult, you can do it. You have the authority to do it. I'm just asking you to also consider the enforcement aspect for the building department and trying to follow through with that.
Right, but where I was going with this is if we use those maximums, it comes out to 53 with the 3 employees. So we're over the what's allowed. If we bring the maximum amount of children down to 20, so now we're talking about 40 with 3 employees, and we're still within the maximum capacity. And it would solve a parking issue as well. See what I'm saying?
I see what you're saying,
Okay.
but to me, if there were 25 children, but less parents showed up, and you still stayed within the 49, is there a problem with that?
But you said there's really no way to police it or enforce it.
Well, there is a way. It requires Gary to go in there and start counting
Right,
children
which
and
is done.
adults, right?
I mean-
People are used to maximum occupancy generally, rather than counting who's a child, who's an adult. And for some, that may be close to the line as whether or not somebody's, an older brother or sister is counted as a child or as an adult. I'm just, if you put the maximum amount, you know, they can have a mix, but as long as the maximum amount of 49 is not exceeded, whether or not, you have to consider whether or not that may be a clearer way for enforcement purposes. But it's up to this board. So if you want to go ahead and have certain numbers of maximum of children, and then assuming that there'd be so many adults accompanying that, so that it wouldn't, in no event is it going to be more than 49, and we'll put that in there. But the question is, do you want to have the subcategory of approved children versus adults?
Okay.
I think that having the max occupancy of 49 is whatever the building code permits.
Yeah.
Is reasonable.
But it
Whatever the
says
building code.
49 people,
Yeah.
and that includes the employees.
Yes,
So
I
there's
understand,
employees.
I understand the 53.
Yeah.
There's 4 more than 49.
Right.
And then that may equate with 4 more cars or some other way, but I think we can enforce or say that it should only be 49 people. So now what are we gonna do with the 4 extra spaces? Is that the question? Is that what you were thinking?
No, but that's okay.
So I'm thinking if the parking spaces that were land banking should be paved.
Yes.
Right, that would help. Those are 4 spaces, right?
5.
5 spaces even.
There was a total
I
of
think
There's 5 on the drawing.
There was a total of
I
7.
think there are 4 that should definitely be. There's one on the, next to the building itself, but I go with the 5.
We're proposing to build that one. Also, in addition to this, we're adding the 360 square feet of space in the 2,400 square foot TD Bank building. So that requires 2 additional spaces where we originally suggested to land bank those. We're now including those to be installed.
Doesn't the gross additional space for the building also add parking requirements, or no?
Because we just,
We did 2.
Oh, it's
And we're saying, and we originally suggested to land bank those, but we're now suggesting
Okay.
to build
I
those.
don't think we should land bank any.
yeah, but we also waived 9.
Yeah.
But there's actually no place to put those.
Yeah.
I know I'm going to sound like a dead horse, but I'm overly concerned about the parking with
It's
a
clean.
facility like this here.
It's clear not to have the land banking.
It's cleaner not to have it at all,
Yeah.
right? So that would help with the occupancy and the additional cars. People
Well,
potentially.
if nothing's land bank, yeah.
So then are we okay with the change of the use, the addition of the personal use space to TD Bank if we get rid of all the land banking and build everything out? Or, I guess you say no. I mean, I don't see another middle ground here. I mean, we waived 9 spaces. I don't see any place to put 9, to waive 9 spaces.
I just think personal service is gonna create more day traffic. And then the other thing is, with this snowstorm, if you look down right past your building where the central, the diner is and the other pharmacy is, they must have, the snow plowing, they must have taken out 10 to 15 parking spaces to put the snow. I'm concerned with the personal use that's gonna happen here. We didn't put the snow, I mean,
I make it a condition of approval that they have to remove the snow.
Well, we have a considerable space for snow storage, which we talked about last time, which is right down in here. This drops down significantly. It's a large volume that could,
Yeah, but there's homes back there too, that I don't, that they would get the brunt of it. If we had storms like this every other week,
When it melts.
And then there's a guardrail. There's a guardrail there, so you're gonna like bring a payloader in and
you just